Welcome to Soul Forum. Each episode invites you to journey across the landscape of our global collective soul. From the moment humankind entered into the story of the universe, we have sought to orient ourselves within this unfolding gift of life. Together, we continue to seek insights and language to navigate our experience of spirituality, ethics, sexuality and gender roles, civic engagement, our role in the ecosphere, and more. Your guide for each of our series are emerging scholars from around the world studying at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. The GTU is one of the world's most comprehensive centers for graduate study of religion and theology. It's a leading destination for leaders and innovators from a wide range of spiritual and philosophical perspectives to explore the world's great religions and wisdom traditions. So give yourself a moment to lean in and journey a little deeper into the human experience. Welcome to Soul Forum.
Welcome back to those who joined us last week. My name is Pravina Rodrigues. I'm a PhD candidate at the Graduate Theological Union's Center for Dharma Studies in Berkeley, California. I major in Hindu-Christian Comparative Theology. I'm your guide in this 4-part series titled The Glory of the Great Goddess in the Hindu Tradition. For those who are tuning in for the first time, we have been talking about the historical development in the theology of the great goddess in the Hindu tradition, which is called Shakta theology. Last episode, we spoke about the goddess's form as one, none, and many. In today's episode, I talk about how these forms create a framework that reconciles diversity of all form and phenomena, including religious diversity. So let's begin today's journey. Just a quick recap. We have been talking about Shakta theology, which is the theology of the great goddess. The term Shakta literally means doctrine of energy, power, or potency. Remember, we spoke about a time in Hindu history in which this energy is depicted as dependent on a male divinity. Depicted in art and iconography, you would see a rather good-looking goddess sitting next to a male divinity, sometimes leaning slightly into his chest. And how in the 6th century, we saw that this principle, this female principle, feminine principle, now stands independent of a male divinity and is envisioned as ultimate reality. The goddess becomes all in all. Last week, we spoke about the 3 forms of the goddess as one, none, and many. As one, Ekam, she presents herself as the aggregate form, the Samashti form, the container that contains all things, the ultimate ground of all reality from which the world of existence springs forth. In her form as none, she is pure potentiality that precedes all form and phenomena. As many, in her individuated Vyashti form, she is cosmological, topographical, environmental, and biodiversity, the contained within the container. Thus, she is both matter and energy. Remember, we spoke about the 3 M's that Professor Rita Sharma, the director of the Center for Dharma Studies at the Graduate Theological Union, talks about to express the aspects of Shakti, the goddess's aspects that give rise to the world of genus and species. The 3 M's are mutability, morphogenesis, and materiality. So as the one transforms to many, matter arises, giving rise to shapes of all kind. As one, the goddess is the force behind the origin of the universe. She is Adya Shakti, the primordial energy of energies. She is also Mula Prakriti, that is, the primordial matter of all creation. She is pre-existent consciousness that gives birth to all existence. The one is the absolute in itself, neither being nor non-being, neither the existent nor the non-existence, inasmuch as these are the categories of our language subjected to the logic of dichotomy. Now I know this is going to confuse and puzzle your mind, so let me explain what this means. We use language to understand ultimate reality, but language can sometimes be inadequate or insufficient. We call ultimate reality God or Goddess or God the Father, sometimes God my rock. Now, these categories are helpful, but at the same time they can be restrictive. For example, in Genesis, right after Adam and Eve make that big boo-boo, it says, "Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees in the garden." So, does that mean that God has legs and God walks? No. These are called anthropomorphisms, which means that basically human terms are used and those understandings are applied to ultimate reality. Elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, God says, "My right hand will save them." Them is the Israelites. So then the question that one would ask is, does God have hands? And if he has hands, then does he have nails too? Or how long are his hands? So you see, using language to understand ultimate reality is both useful, but at the same time it can also be restrictive. So suppose that one has to put the goddess into a category of being. That would be a category for humans, for planetary life, for birds and snails and whatnot. So in that sense, the goddess is not a living thing in the way we would categorize sentient beings. On the other hand, if we have to put her in the category of, say for example, non-being, she cannot belong to that either because she definitely exists. So in that sense, she is both being and non-being. She is both existence and non-existence. I think I've confused you enough. Basically, the Nasadiya Suktam that we looked at last week presented ultimate reality in the format of a puzzle, a paradox. The role of a paradox in Hindu theology is to provide revelation. Buddhists use a similar method called koans to strip the mind of limited understandings of ultimate reality. Koans incorporate paradoxical riddles, parables, and anecdotes within a contemplative framework, and then suddenly the veil is lifted up and you see ultimate reality. In that hymn, the one, Ekam, the goddess, is both being and non-being. As one, she is the absolute, unconditional substratum, the foundation of everything, the source and also the destination of all. As none, she is non-existence or non-being. As none, she is the potentiality that exists before all form and phenomena comes into existence or into being. Remember, the example that we spoke about was thought. Are thoughts existent or non-existent? Now, some of you might think that's a trick question. Where are thoughts before they come into existence, and where do they go after? Thoughts are rooted in potentiality, and they also are impermanent and changing. It's the same thing with actions. For example, one may be in this couch potato state watching TV for the longest time and then suddenly move into an intermediary state, finding random snacks in the apartment, and finally find oneself in front of the refrigerator, perhaps for the 7th time. So all these states are changing. They are in flux. But these states are rooted in a state in which there is a foundation, or in which there is a static energy. So it's like a car. A car cannot move without fuel. So also dynamism is rooted in stasis. So the Hindu world is called Charachara, which basically means movement and motionlessness. This state is called none, shunya, zeroness, because it has the potentiality to change to a state of manyness. So Professor Sharma draws a number system to explain this in class, and in the middle is a zero, which is a shunya. On one side of this number system is +1, +2, so on and so forth, and on the other side is -1, -2, so on and so forth. This zero in the middle basically means the potential to change into any number on the system. I mean, I've been wondering why the zero in my bank account has never changed. Still haven't found the answer to that one, but anyway. So from one comes none, which is an intermediary state, to the state of multiplicity, plurality, and diversity. And that is the world of cosmological diversity that we are seeing, beholding, everything that we touch and feel. Remember, we spoke about the container and the contain. In this state, the goddess is the contain, the matter, the stuff of all creation. This means that immanence, meaning all that we see, is not devoid of transcendence, but rooted in it. Matter is rooted in consciousness. Finitude is knit in infinitude, and temporality is rooted in eternality. One cannot be separate from the other. All ceaseless process is rooted in permanence, eternally intertwined and inseparable. We are talking about the two poles of existence that are never separate. They coexist. And this is the matrix of all reality. This is where we are located. This means that the goddess is everywhere. You don't have to climb the Himalayas on a search to find her. I mean, you can if you want to, just trying to save you some trouble. But she is with you and she is in you. She is you. What are the implications of this kind of cosmology? It means that no matter where you are placed in the universe, no matter your religious affiliation, your professional qualifications, whether you're rich or poor, no matter your gender orientation, you are never separate from the goddess. She pervades all our life worlds, our human endeavors, our histories, our lives, our acts, our joys, and our sufferings. Now herein lies the central problem for Shakta theology. If the goddess is all there is, how come some are not able to see this reality? So Shakta theologians will say that this is due to ignorance. Shakta theology says that this is due to ontological ignorance, and the technical term is avidya. Avidya is not sin. It is a default experience of individuality and subjectivity. A default experience. For example, when you turn on your laptop and you turn on Word, its default language option is English, unless of course your goldfish has changed your language settings. Now, sometimes goldfish do that, mine does. So we are talking about naturally human condition. In Shakta theology, the default experience is an experience of individuality and subjectivity in which there is a separation between us and the rest of reality. This means that no one wakes up experiencing oneness with ultimate reality. Well, in the case of some saints, that might be true, but for everyone else, we have to work hard, we have to get there. So we don't naturally see ourselves in union with ultimate reality, but in some kind of exclusive self-identification in which we see ourselves in this particular spatio-temporal reality. We have our thoughts, our feelings of subjectivity. And this is called individuated consciousness, which is attached to our ego selves. Only when our individuated ego dissolves, then this sense of I amness, which is called ahamkara in Hindu theology, even in Shakta theology, then one can have a non-dual vision of the divine. So ordinary experience of phenomenal reality is related to our limited subjective nature that is embedded in a conventional reality. And this world of name and form is all part of this conventional reality, which is a locus called a samsara, the material world, which is in a constant cyclical changing pattern, which consists of life and death. So as long as an individual remains embedded in this cyclic world, one experiences grief, sorrow, fear, while a release from the state is a dissolution of these elements, shokam dukham bhayam nahi, which means that there will be no grief, no sorrow or fear for those who are released from this state. So I will talk more about the goal of a Shakta devotee to achieve liberation in the last episode. But today I would like to focus on this framework of one, none, and many, and how it reconciles all diversity. A Shakta framework of cosmological diversity is an all-inclusive structure which presents the Mahadevi, that is the great goddess, as the source and summit of all things visible and invisible. In this schema, diversity is accepted as the manifestation of the divine. From a Shakta perspective, all life forms are symbiotically related to one another. In that sense, they are irreplaceable. The rose need not replace the jasmine flower, nor should the tall rosewood tree replace the fruity mango tree. We can coexist in harmony without damaging, excluding, or eradicating the other. What about religious diversity? So biodiversity and cosmic diversity are, of course, accepted as a scientific fact. But what about theological ideas, or what about conceptions of divinity? So diversity of religions are outward expressions of the deep human search for ultimacy, which is absolute. Religions fulfill a teleological necessity in the divine schema. Swami Vivekananda, a 19th century Indian Hindu monk famous for her Chicago speeches, argued that just as children's needs differ from adults, the various religions cater to varied levels of human spirituality, making it necessary for all religions to coexist interdependently. Although there is the one, Ekam, behind all spiritual experiences, each person's emotional and mental needs vary, thereby generating various responses from the divine. In Vivekananda's schema, the dualist occupies the lowest place in that their conception of God is a non-worldly personal power. The middle level belongs to the semi-dualist in that their conception of God is both transcendent beyond the world and also immanent in the world. And the highest level belongs to the non-dualist in that a full unity between the divine and the soul is realized. Swami Vivekananda argued that there is an underlying unity in all religions that forms a common foundation irrespective of the religious path that one follows. He says, quote, "I am the thread that runs through all these pearls, and each pearl is a religion or even a sect thereof. Such are the different pearls, and God is the thread that runs through all of them. Most people, however, are entirely unconscious of it." Unquote. To the Hindu, humans are not traveling from error to truth, but from truth to truth, from lower truth to higher truth. To Vivekananda, all religions, from the lowest fetishisms to the highest absolutism, means so many attempts of the human soul to grasp and realize the infinite, each determined by the conditions of their birth and association, and each of these attempts mark a stage of progress. Shaktas do not claim to be the only religion that offers salvation, yet they claim that they provide a highway to ultimate liberation that appreciates the life of bhoga and yoga. Bhoga means eating, drinking, enjoyment, ruling, sexual pleasure, whatever. And yoga means, you know what yoga means, ascetic practices. And Shaktas would not pass a negative judgment on one or the other. The shift to ultimate reality means enjoying God's blissful nature while not being severed from worldly activities that may vary from individual to individual. The goddess's revelation and salvation are fully present in all of reality. Her knowledge or awareness is not just something innate planted in human consciousness, but her very own nature. Shaktas would call the unveiling of the Divine Mother an existential experience of heightened perception, resulting in a deep feeling of acceptance, even when one is unaware of what or who is accepting us. This movement is conditioned by how much good karma one has acquired in the past and present lives, and the hidden variables, concrete events, history, persons, life situations, that become real opportunities for the Divine Mother Goddess to speak and shape human character. Indeed, as the scholar Pannenberg expressed, this divine exchange is an, and I quote, ongoing, never finished, and future-directed process, unquote. All human nature is graced, and all grace is the goddess's grace acting in and through other religions. The great goddess is seen as embodying persons and even other religions, thus making them ways of salvation for their adherents, just as the church is a sacrament for Christians. Thus, Hindus, Buddhists, and Muslims will also be saved in this life, or perhaps in the next, maybe through their religions or through some other means. Who knows, and who can say conclusively how this will come to pass? The Mahadevi is present in local, social, material, and historical aspects of life. Religious differences and contradictions are part of reality and can hone our perception while challenging the intellect to broaden our horizons and our limited conceptions of divinity. While Shaktas would admit the positive contribution of philosophical intellectual activity in understanding the historical limitedness of religions, they would also caution one of their individual mental limits. Intellectual activity placed within a context of prayer and contemplation breaks the limited bonds of localized consciousness. This means that no one religion can exhaust the divine. Yet the divine is present in the experience of all humans, even for those who may have never gone to church or temples or so-called holy places. While not all may be cut out for the path of religion or mysticism, some may be called to be ethically practical. Some may be called to what is called Karma Yuga, that is, to establish a union with the goddess through pragmatic deeds that alleviate the common problems in the world, problems of suffering, poverty, violence, victimization, and patriarchy. Shakta philosophy upholds both ontological and teleological religious diversity without conflation or synthesis. Based on this infinite diversity we see in the universe, I argue that difference is part of multiplicity and it does not have to be conflated. This means that Buddhist compassion would be different from Christian love, even as each individual Christian experience of agapic love differs and varies. Shakta theology proposes multiple liberations and fulfillments for an individual both in this life and the next. These varieties of ends include the many faces of divinity which is strengthened through communitarian relationships. Those who choose liberation would experience the goddess's unqualified presence in real time, while those who through the exercise of their free will choose other worldly goals, like, maybe being the CFO of Coca-Cola or something like that, would not be lost eternally or suffer in hell or purgatory or be annihilated. They would return in another life until they realize the transient nature of their choices, until they choose liberation for themselves. So it's kind of like Groundhog Day. I don't know if you've seen that movie, in which this television weatherman, Bill Murray, gets trapped in a time loop, forcing him to relive this particular day repeatedly. So in Shakta theology, there is no hell or eternal punishment designated for finite actions caused due to human ignorance on the part of individuals or due to some kind of external pressure that one may have received because of some kind of environmental or social circumstances. In continuity with most Hindu schools, the world and all reality are embedded in the principle of cause and effect that finds expression in the doctrine of karma. Karma does not mean punishment, says Professor Rita Sharma, but didactic learning experiences, which is granted to the humans from one life to another until liberation is attained. While Christian theology has a linear, historical, anthropocentric worldview, Hindus have a cyclic, cosmological framework. So for Christians, basically the linear framework means one life, one world, and in the end, the goats and the sheep get separated. The Christian linear eschatological framework creates an urgency to reach out and save souls before the parousia, that is the second coming of Jesus. While for the Hindu, their worldview is cyclic. It's a forward-looking process consisting of limitless cosmic cycles marked by periods of expansion and contraction. Each cycle contains mainly 4 ages, starting with generation and ending with dissolution. Each cycle consists of 4 ages, Satya, Dwapara, Treta, Kali Yuga, before the final dissolution called Pralaya takes place. Each cosmic cycle goes through the same stages. During the first age, the Vedas, which are the central canonical texts for Hindus, are revealed, after which deterioration of truth takes place in subsequent ages. In the last age, called the Kali Yuga, truth is replaced by lies and corruption, thereby prompting divine descent in the form of avatars, which literally means crossing over to change the course of evil to righteousness. This allows the individual endless possibilities of rebirth, either on the earth or in another plane of existence, until one knows oneself as eternal, as divine. This realization of one's true nature brings liberation that frees one from the constant cycles of birth and suffering. Sometimes liberation may further generate rebirth, as in the case of Sri Ramakrishna, who was Swami Vivekananda's guru, and it happens for the sake of other individuals who need to be rescued from bondage. Swami Vivekananda argues that the idea of reincarnation runs parallel with the doctrine of the eternity of the human soul. He says, quote, "Nothing which ends at one point can be without a beginning, and nothing that begins at one point can be without an end," unquote. The presence of an absolute beginning necessarily shifts all blame onto the divine being, thereby making him responsible for the pain and suffering in the world. However, he argues, the doctrine of reincarnation asserts the freedom of the soul so that one is responsible for the miseries that one suffers. He says, quote, "If I set the wheel in motion, I am responsible for the result. And if I can bring misery, I can also stop it. It necessarily follows that we are free. There is no such thing as fate. There is nothing to compel us. What we have done, that we can also undo," unquote. Individual agency and choice are restricted by interdependent forces, both visible, drishtaphala, and invisible, adrishtaphala, acting within oneself and in the world. These forces, both visible and invisible, act within oneself as one's inherent karmic makeup, determining what is necessary for the advancement of one's soul, thereby picking a particular place, time, family, and specific learning experiences to burn bad karma and generate new ones necessary for liberation. These forces also act in and through one's environment, thereby creating circumstances in terms of events or accidents or other specific life realities that are necessary conditions for an individual's growth. These hidden variables, invisible to the naked eye, are embedded in the cosmic law of karma, which is basically the fructification of one's actions from present or previous births. The individual now exerts agency to overcome both their inherited limitations in terms of their natural dispositions. It could be psychological nature or karmic influences or inclinations, and harsh realities that they might have to face in society or their surroundings. Thus, there is no urgency in terms of forcing anyone else to be saved, because one might have to go through several life births to move from habits of, say for example, codependence to independence, emotional instability to being emotionally sound, until one finally understands that liberation is the key. Liberation may not be achieved in just one lifetime, but require several times before one actually finds release. This system creates empathy towards all humans, no matter their place or psycho-spiritual composition. No pressure is exerted to force anyone, since time is not of the essence, and each individual's learning experience is specific, nor are any judgments passed, since a variety of factors determine individual experiences. Thus, hell is not a place, but a state in which individuals go through pain and suffering as they learn life lessons to advance themselves on their spiritual path on earth. Second, there is also an absence of the concept of sin in Shakta theology. Although there is a concept of wrongdoing, which is called papam, it is not exactly comparable to sin. Papam and punyam are basically acts of merit and demerit that result from one's not being aligned to the order of the cosmos, which is called Rita, the ontological order of the universe. This universal cosmic order determines one's function in the universe, like the way the sun's job is to shine, the flowers to blossom, so on and so forth. This functional determination does not absolve the individual from one's normative ethico-moral duties that arise in the world. Third, an independent adversary such as Satan does not exist in Shakta theology either. Sri Aurobindo, a mystic and activist, a 19th century mystic and activist, argues that Satan acts as a prop, a comfortable device for individuals to dodge responsibility for all that seems to us evil or terrible. Human moral conceptions of justice or virtue and righteousness are projected onto this concept of God, and all elements that are dark, deformed, ugly, and irreconcilable with light are basically applied to this adversary called Satan, an entity who he calls is semi-omnipotent. Since the only thing in the universe is the divine mother goddess, evil has no grounding in Shakta theology. Moral evil arises through human acts that may damage oneself, others, or one's environment. Its origin is in the human will and manifests itself as individuals exercise agency and choice. Moral evil is embedded in a larger matrix of what is called natural evil in Christian theology. In this view, floods, earthquakes, or the terrifying nature of thunderstorms are all byproducts of a reality that is not evil per se, but functions of temporal reality. Good and evil, life and death, pain and pleasure are interwoven in the fabric of the universe and are inescapable from temporal reality. The individual traverses in the goddess's diverse manifestations, even when they may be unrealized or where they may lack this blissful realization of this divine ubiquity. We have been talking about diversity contained in the unity of the One, but I have also introduced you to the paradoxical complexity within this diversity. The complexity of the world of diversity is all contained within the goddess. In one of the central texts for Shakta devotees called the Devi Mahatmyam, meaning the glory of the great goddess, this complete paradox of the universe in terms of her form is expressed in beautiful melodic verses in one of the angas, which is called the Devyatharvashisham. This is one of my favorite verses, and I'll also translate what it means. Sarve vai deva devi mupatasthu kasitvam mahadevi ti. So all the gods and the goddesses came near to the great goddess, and they asked, "Who are you?" Sa bravita aham brahma swarupini martif prakrita purushatma jagata shunyam cha. She replied, "I am the intrinsic nature of consciousness. From me both nature and consciousness have taken birth, this world of true existence and untrue appearance. Aham anando, aham vijnane, aham brahmani veditavve, aham panchabhutani, aham akhilam jagata Vedoham avedoham, vidyaham avidyaham, ajaham ajaham, ardhachodvam chatyarkshyaham. So she says she is both bliss and non-bliss, knowledge and non-knowledge, the desire to know Brahma, that is God, and also non-Brahma, the great elements of the universe and their uninvited individual aspects, the entire perceivable universe, both the wisdom of eternal harmony and the lack of wisdom, knowledge and ignorance, born and again the one who takes birth. She is both the below and even the beyond. She abides in good fortune among the virtuous and also misfortune among the wicked. So this is a deep mystical vision presented in the Devi Mahatmyam. And as humans, we tend to look at the bright and the beautiful aspects of our life, and we think that those are aspects of reality in which divinity exists. But may we also find divinity in the darkest of the darks, in our pain and suffering, in the lack of joy, even when we see ourselves dysmorph into forms that we find unworthy. With this, I, Pravina Rodrigues, your host in this 4-part series, sign off. May you have a wonderful morning, evening, wherever you are.
Thank you for being part of Soul Forum today. We appreciate you tuning in and listening. Each episode allows you a chance to reach out to the speaker with one of your questions or insights, and I invite you to do that by just simply sending an email to soulforum@oslc.net. And we'll gather together some of the questions or insights and put together a small panel to have a live Zoom Q&A with each of our speakers throughout the series. My hope is that as you've listened to this podcast, that it can help you navigate your own soul's journey, as all of us are, in a sense, given the opportunity really to engage our life experience, not just through our mind and our bodies, but also through the way in which we express spirit in the world. So thanks for being a part of this journey into our common life and into the ways we give expression to our own souls in this day and age. See you next week.